What goes on in the mind of a narcissist after you've walked away? What do they secretly think about you when the silence grows louder, when the distance becomes undeniable, and when the separation stretches longer than they ever expected? Today, we will uncover the hidden psychology of the narcissist, what they feel, what they fear, and what they will never admit to anyone. If you've ever wondered how a narcissist truly views you after you've broken free, stay with me, because this will change how you see everything. When you walked away, something far deeper than just separation occurred. For the narcissist, that moment represented not simply the loss of a partner or a companion, but the collapse of their entire framework of control. You have to understand, control for a narcissist isn't just something they enjoy. It's the very essence of how they define themselves. It is the proof that they exist, that they matter, that their influence extends beyond their own fragile self. And when that control is stripped away, even quietly, even without confrontation, it shakes them in ways that they will never be able to put into words. For so long, they thought they had you figured out. They thought they could push your buttons, that they could say one sentence and watch you bend, that they could withhold affection and watch you chase it. It was a predictable dance for them, one that gave them a sense of mastery over you. But then, in one decisive act, you stopped dancing. You didn't scream, you didn't plead, you didn't negotiate. You simply walked away. And that action spoke louder than any words ever could. It declared, without explanation, that their grip on you had dissolved. That is a kind of shock they cannot process easily, because it cuts straight into the illusion they've lived inside of. The illusion that they are untouchable, that no one ever really leaves them. What begins to unfold in their mind after that is not peace, not acceptance, but panic wrapped in denial. They don't want to admit to themselves that they've lost control. Instead, they run through every memory, every conversation, every fight, searching for a lever they might have missed. They think, maybe if I said this differently, maybe if I reached out now, maybe if I provoked them with silence, they would come back. It's not love that drives this thinking. It's desperation to reestablish the chain that tied you to them. You were not just a person to them, you were proof of their power. And without you, they're confronted with the horrifying possibility that they aren't as powerful as they convinced themselves they were. And you have to see the irony here. They spent so much time convincing you that you were the dependent one, that you needed them, that your world would fall apart without their validation. But when you removed yourself, who was the one who fell apart? Not you. It was them, because their identity was built on being needed, being pursued, being in control. And in the silence that follows separation, they're forced to face the emptiness of their own existence. That's why their thoughts about you are so relentless. That's why they can't stop replaying the moments when you were under their influence. They want to believe they still matter to you, because the alternative is unbearable, the possibility that you are free. But freedom is exactly what terrifies them. They know that the longer you are away, the stronger you become. And that strength exposes something they've worked their entire lives to hide, the fragility of their own sense of self. They don't just lose control of you, they lose the mirror that reflected back the image of who they wanted to believe they were. You were the evidence that they had power. And when you stepped away, you shattered that evidence. Now they're left with nothing but the truth, and it's a truth they cannot handle. So, in secret, they think about you constantly. They imagine scenarios where they still have influence, where you return, where the old patterns resume. It's their way of holding on to the illusion, because admitting the truth would mean facing their own hollowness. And this is where the depth of the human story lies. Because for you, leaving may have been about survival, about reclaiming your dignity, about finally listening to the quiet voice inside you that whispered, you deserve more than this. But for them, your leaving was like pulling the rug out from under an entire house of cards. It's not just that they lost you, it's that they lost the version of themselves they had constructed through you. And once that illusion crumbles, the panic grows. The narcissist thinks, secretly, if I couldn't control them, what does that say about me? If they don't need me, then who am I? These questions haunt them, even if they bury them under arrogance, even if they pretend indifference. And here's the subtle but crucial part. They will never confess this to you, because their pride won't allow it. They will project indifference, maybe even contempt, as if your absence doesn't bother them. But beneath that mask, their mind is spinning. They're shocked, unsettled, and deeply disturbed by the idea that you've broken free of the invisible strings they thought could hold you forever. This is why separation has such a profound impact on them. It exposes the lie of their power. It reveals the truth that control is only real when you give it away, and the moment you stop giving it, it dissolves. So what they secretly think when the silence is long, when the distance grows wider, is that they've lost something they can't get back. They may try to convince themselves otherwise. They may scheme and imagine ways to re-enter your life, but deep down, that shock of losing control lingers like a wound that won't heal. And no matter how they try to cover it, no matter how they try to deny it, the reality remains the moment you walked away, you didn't just escape their grasp. You dismantled the very foundation of the world they built around themselves. You might imagine that once you're gone, the narcissist simply moves forward, that the silence of separation means you've been erased from their thoughts. But the truth is far more complicated. The human mind does not release what once gave it power so easily, and the narcissistic mind, in particular, has a tendency to turn absence into obsession. On the surface, they might present themselves as indifferent, cold, maybe even triumphant, as if your leaving was insignificant. Yet beneath that mask, their thoughts circle back to you again and again in ways they don't want anyone else to see. The longer the silence lasts, the more you occupy their inner world. It becomes a kind of paradox. They act as if you mean nothing, while privately you mean far too much. For the narcissist, relationships are not rooted in love, but in control, in the intoxicating feeling of having someone orbit around them. When you were near, they fed on your attention, your reactions, even your pain. That constant stream of emotional supply was what gave them the sense of being alive. But when separation stretches out, when the source of that validation disappears, they don't just forget. It gnaws at them. They lie awake wondering, what are they doing? Who are they with? Do they think about me as much as I think about them? They would never admit it, but the silence begins to eat away at them. It becomes unbearable, not because they miss you in the way healthy people miss someone they love, but because they miss the control, the ability to dictate how you feel, the certainty that you were still within reach. And so they obsess. They stalk your absence in their mind, replaying conversations, remembering the way you looked at them, rehearsing how they once pulled you back after you tried to leave. The longer the silence grows, the more distorted these thoughts become. In secret, they wonder if you're happy now, if you built a new life, if you've found strength without them. And that thought, more than anything, drives their fixation. Because if you're thriving, it means that their narrative, the story they told themselves about being indispensable, was false. They struggle with this contradiction. They want to believe you're still tethered to them, yet they fear you've broken free entirely. That tension becomes a silent battle in their mind, one they cannot win. It's strange, isn't it? The very person who once made you doubt yourself now lies awake doubting themselves. They wonder if you're comparing them to someone better, if you've realized how small their power really was. They tell themselves you'll come back, that the bond was too strong to sever completely, but secretly they're haunted by the possibility that you've grown immune to their tactics. That is why distance creates such intensity for them. Every day you don't return, every moment you don't reach out, is like another confirmation that their grip has loosened. This is intolerable for someone whose sense of self relies on being able to dominate the emotional landscape of another. Think about how paradoxical this is. The narcissist who spent so much time convincing you that you were dependent now finds themselves dependent on imagining you. They cannot stand the idea of you being free, yet they can't stop envisioning it. They become quietly obsessed, checking for signs, inventing scenarios, imagining encounters that will never happen. They may even convince themselves that you're still thinking of them just as much, because admitting otherwise would unravel their pride. And so they create an internal world where you're still orbiting around them, even if in reality you're moving further away with each passing day. This silent obsession isn't always visible. Outwardly, they may seem calm, even dismissive, as though they've written you off. But human beings are far more complex than the masks they wear. Behind the bravado, there is a constant mental tug of war. They try to bury thoughts of you under distractions, new pursuits, maybe even new relationships. But those distractions don't last, because when the night grows quiet, when there's nothing left to fill the silence, their thoughts return to you. And every return is another reminder of what they've lost. And here's the part they'll never admit: the obsession is proof of their weakness, not their strength. If they truly didn't care, they wouldn't think of you at all. If you were truly insignificant, you wouldn't lie rent-free in their mind. But the fact that they keep circling back to you, that your absence has become louder than your presence ever was, reveals the truth they try to bury. It reveals that their power over you was always fragile, that it only existed as long as you allowed it. And once you stepped away, that fragile construct collapsed, leaving them with nothing but the echo of what used to be. The silence becomes their tormentor. It speaks louder than any confrontation, louder than any argument. It whispers the truth they don't want to hear: you're gone, and they no longer control the narrative. And so they obsess, not out of love, but out of fear. Fear of irrelevance, fear of replacement, fear of being forgotten. That obsession becomes a cage of their own making, one they built with pride and now inhabit with shame. And as the distance grows longer, the obsession only deepens, because with every passing day, the possibility of regaining control slips further away. There's a thought that begins to creep into the narcissist's mind as the weeks turn into months, as the silence of separation stretches on. And it is a thought they despise more than almost anything else. What if I've been replaced? For a narcissist, this isn't just about jealousy in the way most people might feel it. It's something far deeper, far more threatening, because it strikes at the very heart of their carefully constructed identity. They don't see relationships as a bond between equals, but as a hierarchy, a ladder where they must always remain at the top. The idea that someone else could step into their place, that someone else could offer you what they could not, is unbearable to them because it dismantles the illusion that they were irreplaceable. When they first lose you, they may comfort themselves with arrogance. They tell themselves that no one else could ever measure up to them, that you'll eventually see their absence as a wound too painful to bear. But as time passes, as the silence becomes heavier, that certainty begins to crack. They start to wonder. They start to imagine. They begin to picture you smiling at someone else, laughing freely in ways you never did with them, building a life that doesn't include their shadow. And that image cuts them deeply because it doesn't just mean you've moved on. It means their entire narrative about who they are collapses. If you could replace them, then they were never as powerful, never as necessary, never as unique as they told themselves they were. This fear grows quietly, but relentlessly. It shows up in the way they stalk your memory, in the way they might even check in from a distance, trying to piece together whether you've found someone new. It shows up in their late night ruminations, when they remember the times you relied on them and wonder if you found someone stronger, more stable, more compassionate to fill that role. And the irony here is striking. They spent so long making you feel as though you were dependent on them, as though your worth hinged on their approval. Yet now it is they who are tormented by the idea that you've discovered a life, maybe even a love, that renders them obsolete. The narcissist ego cannot tolerate comparison. Comparison is the great enemy of their fragile self-image because deep down, beneath all the arrogance, they know they are not what they pretend to be. They know the mask is thin. They know that their charm was a performance, their affection a strategy, their confidence a cover for deep insecurity. And when the thought arises that you might be with someone who offers genuine love, real consistency, authentic care, the ground beneath them shakes. They fear that in comparison to this new figure, they will be revealed for what they are: hollow, manipulative, incapable of true intimacy. That fear is suffocating, and it's one they will never admit to because it would mean acknowledging their own inadequacy. But think of the irony here, because this fear of being replaced is not entirely irrational. It's a projection of what they themselves do. Narcissists are masters of replacement. When one source of validation dries up, they look for another. They move from person to person, always searching for the next supply, always needing to feel wanted, adored, obeyed. And yet, the moment they are the ones being replaced, the moment they are on the receiving end of the very cycle they've inflicted on others, the devastation is overwhelming. They cannot stand being treated as dispensable because it exposes the truth that they were never the center of the universe, only the center of their own illusion. And this fear reveals something deeper about human nature itself. All of us, at some level, want to believe we are irreplaceable in the lives of those we love. It's part of what makes love so meaningful. The belief that what we share is unique, that it cannot simply be swapped out or replicated. But in the narcissist's case, that desire is twisted into entitlement. They don't just want to be cherished. They demand it. They believe it is their right, regardless of how they treated you, regardless of the damage they caused. So when the possibility arises that you found someone better, someone who gives you peace instead of turmoil, someone who lifts you up instead of tearing you down, the narcissist feels not just fear, but rage. Because in their world, you were supposed to remain trapped, unable to imagine a life beyond them. Yet your ability to replace them, your ability to step into freedom, to find joy, to rediscover yourself, is exactly what dismantles their power. It's the proof that they never owned you the way they thought they did. And as that realization dawns, their thoughts turn darker. They may try to convince themselves that no one else could possibly understand you the way they did. They may cling to memories, twisting them into evidence that they are unforgettable. But secretly, in the recesses of their mind, they know the truth: someone else could love you better, and that knowledge burns them from the inside. And the longer the separation lasts, the sharper this fear becomes. Each day you don't return is another day that suggests you've found fulfillment without them. Each moment of silence feels like confirmation that their role in your life has ended permanently. They might lash out. They might try to reappear. They might even attempt to sabotage any new relationship they suspect you have. But underneath those actions lies the same unspoken terror that they have been replaced, that their reign over your emotions has ended, that their grand illusion of superiority has shattered beyond repair. That fear, more than anything else, is what keeps them bound to you long after you've walked away. It's why you linger in their thoughts, why they can't fully let go, why they continue to obsess in secret. Because if you've truly replaced them, if you've found someone better, then their power was never real in the first place. And that is the truth they cannot face. There's something profoundly ironic about the way the narcissist thinks about you after a long separation. On the surface, they will do everything in their power to project disdain, to act indifferent, to behave as though your absence means nothing. They may even go out of their way to suggest that they're better off without you, that they're thriving, that you were the one who lost. But beneath all that noise, there's a quiet truth they will never confess. They admire you. And that admiration isn't the warm, honest kind that comes from respect. It's a twisted, reluctant acknowledgement that despite everything they did to try to diminish you, you still found the strength to stand, to leave, to build a life without them. In the silent corridors of their mind, they can't help but marvel at that. When you walked away, you did something they could never imagine doing themselves. You broke a cycle. You took the risk of losing them in order to find yourself. That takes courage, and courage is something the narcissist has always lacked. They survive by clinging to others, by draining strength from those around them, by weaving illusions to cover their insecurity. But you chose the harder path. You stepped into the unknown, into the silence, into the possibility of loneliness, and you endured it. For them, that's unimaginable. And so even though they would never say it, they look at you with a kind of grudging admiration, because in you they see qualities they wish they had but don't. This admiration comes with envy, of course. It eats at them because admiration requires humility, and humility is something they resist with all their being. To admit that they admire you would mean admitting that you have something they lack, and that is intolerable to their fragile ego. So the admiration stays hidden, cloaked in anger, twisted into mockery or dismissiveness. They may tell themselves you were foolish, that you'll regret leaving, that your independence is just a phase. But the very fact that they spend so much energy trying to diminish you is proof of the impact you've made. If you truly meant nothing, they wouldn't need to explain you away in their mind. And there's another layer here. They admire the freedom you represent. The narcissist, for all their illusions of power, is trapped. They're enslaved to their need for validation, their constant hunger for attention, their endless search for control. They live in chains of their own making, bound to the exhausting cycle of manipulation. When they look at you living beyond their influence, they see someone who has escaped the prison they cannot even admit they're in. That breeds envy, yes, but it also sparks a kind of awe, because you've done what they can't, walked into freedom without looking back. That silent admiration shows up in subtle ways. They may imitate aspects of you, adopting behaviors, styles, or ideas that they once mocked when you did them. They may speak about you in ways that betray a strange respect, even if they try to mask it as disdain. And deep inside, they carry the awareness that you've become a symbol of resilience, at least in their story. They can't erase the fact that you survived them, and survival in their world is a victory they cannot ignore. Think of what this means for you. For so long, they tried to convince you that you were weak, that you couldn't stand without them, that your value was tied to their approval. And now, in the aftermath of separation, they secretly admire the very strength they once denied in you. That should tell you something about the nature of growth, about the power of reclaiming yourself. Because it's not just that you proved them wrong, it's that you exposed the lie at the core of their manipulation. You revealed that their power over you was never as absolute as they wanted it to seem. And in leaving, you showed them a reflection of what true strength looks like. But this admiration doesn't soften them. It doesn't transform them into better people. Instead, it becomes another source of inner conflict. They're torn between despising you for escaping and admiring you for having the courage to do it. That tension gnaws at them because it forces them to confront their own inadequacy. Every time they think of you, they're reminded of what they lack: resilience, independence, authenticity. And rather than face that directly, they bury it under bitterness. Still, the admiration lingers. They can't destroy it because it's rooted in truth. And here's the reality. This is why your absence is so powerful. Presence can be controlled, influenced, manipulated. But absence, when it is chosen, when it is firm, becomes a mirror that reflects back everything the narcissist cannot be. It is your silence, your refusal to return, your decision to stand on your own that forces them to see qualities they cannot deny. And though they'll never admit it, though they'll bury it under layers of arrogance, they admire that. They admire that you became the very thing they feared most: free, untouchable beyond their grasp. That secret admiration is a testament to your strength. It's a reminder that even in the darkest of situations, even when you were made to doubt your worth, you carried within you the ability to rise. And now, in the long aftermath of separation, the narcissist sees that truth clearer than ever, even if they never speak it aloud. They may try to rewrite the story, they may try to pretend indifference, but deep in their thoughts, they hold a reluctant reverence for the one who walked away and never looked back. So if you've ever wondered what the narcissist secretly thinks about you now after a long separation, know this: their mind is not at peace. Behind the mask of indifference lies shock, obsession, fear, and even admiration. And while they wrestle with their silence, you are free to build a life that no manipulation can touch. Remember this truth: your strength, your growth, and your independence are the very things they can never control. And that is the ultimate victory.